The screen fades in from black. A soft hum of city life fills the background. Cars honking faintly, distant chatter blending into the ambient noise of a bustling metropolis. The camera pans upward slowly, revealing a sleek skyscraper piercing through the clouds. At its pinnacle, on the top floor, sits an office bathed in warm golden light despite the late hour. Inside, a man stands by the massive glass window overlooking the glittering expanse of New York City below. His silhouette is sharp against the skyline, his posture rigid but tinged with exhaustion. This is Jonathan Reed, a name synonymous with success, innovation, and power. But tonight, something feels off. Jonathan adjusts his tie absent-mindedly, his fingers brushing against the expensive fabric that seems almost too perfect for this moment. He exhales deeply, running a hand over his face as if trying to wipe away some invisible weight pressing down on him. For all his achievements, a billion-dollar tech empire built from scratch, accolades lining every wall of his penthouse suite, there's a void here that no amount of money or accolades can fill. And it's not just loneliness. It's deeper than that. It's a secret he carries like a leaden anchor tied around his soul. Imagine, begins a voiceover, smooth yet tinged with intrigue, what it would be like to live your life knowing you could never truly connect with half the population, not because you chose not to, but because your body simply wouldn't allow it. As these words hang in the air, we see flashes of Jonathan's daily routine. He walks briskly through the corridors of his company headquarters, flanked by male executives who laugh at his jokes and nod approvingly at his decisions. Yet, whenever a woman enters the frame, even briefly, he tenses up visibly. Once, during a board meeting, a female colleague leans closer to pass him a document, and he instinctively recoils, sneezing violently. The room falls silent for a split second before someone awkwardly mutters, "Bless you." These moments aren't rare, they're part of his reality. We cut to another scene. Jonathan sitting stiffly in a sterile doctor's office. Papers are scattered across the desk, medical charts pinned to the wall behind him. The doctor, a middle-aged man with glasses perched precariously on his nose, looks both perplexed and sympathetic as he delivers the verdict. "Mr. Reed, based on our tests, it appears you have developed an extreme allergic reaction to women. Physically, emotionally, it's unprecedented, but there's no denying what the data shows." Jonathan stares blankly ahead, his jaw tightening. He doesn't argue, doesn't ask questions. Instead, he thanks the doctor curtly and leaves without another word. Back in his car, parked under the dim glow of a street lamp, he grips the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turn white. His mind races. How did this happen? Why him? What does this mean for his future? Now let's rewind slightly. To understand how Jonathan ended up here, we need to delve deeper into who he is, and, more importantly, why he is the way he is. Born into modest means, Jonathan grew up watching his father struggle to provide for their family. His mother worked tirelessly as well, juggling multiple jobs to keep food on the table. From a young age, Jonathan learned the value of hard work and determination. School came easily to him. Numbers and logic were second nature. By the time he graduated high school, he already had several patents pending for inventions he'd tinkered with in his garage. But brilliance often comes at a cost. While Jonathan excelled academically, socially he was a different story. Awkward and introverted, he found himself constantly overshadowed by peers who seemed effortlessly charming. Girls especially baffled him. They giggled when he spoke, rolled their eyes when he tried to impress them, and outright rejected him when he mustered the courage to express interest. One particular incident stands out. A dance during his senior year of high school. He'd spent weeks rehearsing what to say to Sarah, the girl he'd crushed on since freshman year. When the moment finally arrived, she laughed in his face, calling him weird in front of everyone. That night marked the beginning of his lifelong aversion to romantic entanglements. Fast forward 2 decades, and Jonathan has transformed himself into a titan of industry. He surrounds himself with people who admire him, respect him, even fear him, but none who truly know him. His wealth affords him luxuries most can only dream of, yet it also isolates him further. He avoids social gatherings where women might be present, preferring instead to spend evenings alone in his penthouse, nursing a glass of whiskey while staring out at the city lights. Sometimes he wonders if this is all there is to life. Is this really what success looks like? Here's where you come in, dear viewer. If you've ever felt trapped by circumstances beyond your control, if you've ever wondered whether change is possible, then stay tuned. Because Jonathan's story is about to take a turn neither he nor anyone else could have predicted. But first, consider subscribing to this channel. Not only will you get updates on stories like this one, but you'll also join a community dedicated to exploring the extraordinary within the ordinary. Just click the button below. Now, back to Jonathan. We return to the present day. Another sleepless night stretches ahead of him. As dawn breaks, casting a pale light over the horizon, Jonathan makes a decision. He needs help. Someone to clean his mansion after last week's disastrous corporate party. Someone unobtrusive, efficient, and preferably male. Little does he know, fate has other plans. The morning sun filters through the floor to ceiling, windows of Jonathan's penthouse casting long shadows across the marble floors. The aftermath of the corporate party is evident everywhere. Empty champagne flutes scattered carelessly on side tables, crumpled napkins littering the plush rugs, and faint smudges of fingerprints marring the pristine glass surfaces. It's a mess that screams excess, but Jonathan doesn't notice anymore. He's used to it, the chaos left behind by others, the hollow echo of laughter now replaced by silence. What he does notice, however, is the growing sense of unease in his chest as he surveys the scene. He sighs heavily, pulling out his phone to dial his assistant. "Send someone over," he barks into the receiver, his tone clipped and impatient. "I don't care who it is, just make sure they're discreet." Hours later, there's a soft knock at the door. Jonathan opens it reluctantly, expecting yet another faceless worker sent to tidy up his life without leaving a trace. But standing before him is not what or who he expected. Clara Bennett steps inside, her presence immediately filling the cavernous space with an unassuming warmth. She's dressed simply in jeans and a light sweater, her dark hair pulled back into a practical ponytail. In one hand, she carries a cleaning caddy brimming with supplies. In the other, a clipboard where she jots down notes about the scope of work. Her eyes scan the room quickly, taking stock of the task ahead, and then meet Jonathan's gaze with quiet confidence. "Mr. Reed?" she asks, her voice steady and clear. There's no deference in her tone, no fawning admiration for the billionaire standing before her, just professionalism tempered with kindness. Jonathan hesitates for a moment, caught off guard by her directness. He nods curtly. "Yes, you're here to clean?" "That's right," Clara replies, stepping past him to set her things down. She moves with purpose, already assessing which areas need attention first. "Don't worry, I'll stay out of your way." As she begins unpacking her supplies, Jonathan watches her closely, his curiosity piqued despite himself. There's something different about her, not just her demeanor, but the way she carries herself. She exudes a quiet strength, a resilience that seems almost out of place in this world of opulence and pretense. For reasons he can't quite articulate, he finds himself lingering instead of retreating to his office as he normally would. Clara notices his hesitation and turns to face him. "Is there anything specific you'd like me to focus on?" she asks, tilting her head slightly. "No," Jonathan mutters, shifting uncomfortably. "Just do what you came here to do." But as Clara starts working, Jonathan realizes something unusual is happening. At first it's subtle, a slight tightening in his throat, a familiar itch at the back of his sinuses. He freezes, panic rising in his chest. Not now, not here. He glances at Clara, who is humming softly to herself as she dusts a bookshelf. To his astonishment, the symptoms don't escalate. No sneezing, no coughing, no overwhelming urge to flee the room. Confused, he retreats to his office, closing the doctor firmly behind him. Sitting at his desk, he tries to rationalize what just happened. Was it coincidence, or was there something about Clara that made his usual reaction less severe? Meanwhile, Clara continues her work undeterred. As she cleans, she takes mental notes about the space and its owner. The penthouse is immaculate, yes, but there's an underlying sterility to it, as if no one truly lives here. Photos are conspicuously absent, personal touches minimal. Even the furniture feels more like props than pieces chosen with care. Her thoughts drift to her own life, so vastly different from Jonathan's. Clara grew up in a small town, raised by a single mother who worked tirelessly as a nurse. Money was always tight, but their home was filled with love and laughter. When her mother fell ill a few years ago, Clara dropped everything to care for her, racking up medical bills that still loom over her like a storm cloud. Now she works tirelessly to pay them off, dreaming of one day opening her own cleaning and organizing business. For Clara, every job is an opportunity, not just to earn money, but to learn, observe, and grow. And this job, she senses, might be more than just another paycheck. Back in his office, Jonathan can't shake the feeling that Clara is unlike anyone he's ever met. He pulls up her file on his computer, curious to know more about her. According to the agency, she has excellent references and a reputation for being thorough and reliable. But there's little else. No details about her personal life, no clues to explain why she doesn't trigger his usual response. Frustrated, he closes the file and leans back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Why does she intrigue him so much? Is it because she seems immune to his wealth and status, or is it something deeper, something he hasn't allowed himself to consider in years? Later that afternoon, Clara finishes her initial walkthrough and approaches Jonathan's office. Knocking lightly, she waits for permission to enter. When he calls out, she steps inside, holding a small stack of papers. "I've made a list of recommendations," she says, placing the papers on his desk. "There are some areas that could use deeper cleaning, air vents, upholstery, things like that. Also, I noticed some mold in the corner of the guest bathroom. It might be worth addressing sooner rather than later." Jonathan looks up, surprised by her initiative. Most people in her position wouldn't dare offer unsolicited advice, especially to someone like him. But Clara isn't most people. "Thank you," he says finally, his voice softer than before. "I'll have my team look into it." Clara nods, sensing his discomfort, but choosing not to push further. "If you need anything else, let me know." As she leaves the room, Jonathan watches her go, his mind racing. There is something about her calmness, her competence, her refusal to be intimidated, that unsettles him in the best possible way. For the first time in years, he feels a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things don't have to stay the way they are forever. And perhaps, dear viewer, you're starting to see why Clara is such a pivotal character in this story. If you're enjoying the unfolding drama between these two complex individuals, consider subscribing to our channel. This journey is far from over, and we'd love for you to join us as we explore the twists and turns ahead. With that said, let's continue. The next morning, Clara arrives at Jonathan's penthouse earlier than usual. She's brought coffee. For herself, black, no sugar, and a thermos of herbal tea she hopes might help soothe her nerves. Yesterday's encounter left her unsettled in ways she can't quite explain. There was something in Jonathan's eyes, a mix of vulnerability and defiance, that tugged at her instincts. He wasn't just another client, he was a puzzle waiting to be solved. As she begins tidying up the living room, her attention is drawn to a stack of papers left carelessly on the coffee table. Most are business documents, contracts, financial reports, but one catches her eye. It's a medical report, slightly crumpled at the edges with bold letters at the top, allergic reaction analysis. With Tripod, Clara hesitates for a moment before picking it up. She knows she shouldn't pry, but something tells her this document holds answers to questions she hasn't even fully formed yet. The report details Jonathan's condition in clinical terms: heightened histamine responses triggered by proximity to women, exacerbated by environmental factors such as dust mites and volatile organic compounds, VOCs. The conclusion is stark. Patient exhibits psychosomatic symptoms consistent with severe emotional trauma. Clara reads the words twice, her brow furrowing. Psychosomatic? Emotional trauma? This wasn't just a physical allergy, it ran deeper, rooted in something far more complex. Her heart softens toward Jonathan. Whatever walls he'd built around himself weren't just barriers against others, they were shields protecting him from pain. She carefully places the report back where she found it, her mind racing. Could it be true? Was his aversion to women not purely biological, but tied to some unresolved wound from his past? And if so, what could she do to help? Determined to understand. More, Clara spends the rest of the day observing Jonathan whenever their paths cross. She notices how he avoids direct eye contact, how his shoulders tense when someone mentions relationships or romance. Yet, when he speaks to her, there's a flicker of ease, a subtle relaxation that suggests trust, however fragile. That evening, after finishing her work, Clara sits alone in her small apartment surrounded by books and research materials. Over the years, she's developed a habit of educating herself on topics that interest her, and tonight, her focus is on psychosomatic illnesses. She dives deep into articles, studies, and case histories, piecing together a clearer picture of what Jonathan might be experiencing. What she discovers fascinates her. Psychosomatic reactions occur when the mind convinces the body to manifest physical symptoms in response to stress or trauma. In Jonathan's case, his allergic reactions could stem from a deeply ingrained fear or rejection, perhaps stemming from childhood, as the report hinted. But without knowing the specifics, any attempt to help would be guesswork at best. Still, Clara feels compelled to try. She recalls snippets of conversations they've had, the guarded way he talks about his past, the fleeting moments of openness that vanish almost as quickly as they appear. There's a story there, buried beneath layers of success and solitude, and she wants to uncover it. The following day, Clara returns to the penthouse armed with newfound knowledge and a plan. As she works, she subtly steers their interactions toward more personal territory. "You know," she says casually while dusting the bookshelves, "I used to think my mom's migraines were all in her head until I learned they were linked to stress. Sometimes our bodies react to things we don't even realize we're carrying." Jonathan pauses mid-step, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Clara thinks she's overstepped, but then he nods slowly. "I suppose that's possible," he murmurs, his voice low and distant. Encouraged, Clara presses gently. "Have you ever thought about exploring why your reactions happen? Like maybe talking to someone who specializes in this kind of thing?" Jonathan stiffens, his defenses rising instantly. "I've seen enough doctors," he snaps, turning away. "They all say the same thing. Avoid triggers. That's easier said than done." "I'm sorry," Clara says softly, sensing his discomfort. "I didn't mean to upset you." He exhales sharply, running a hand through his hair. "It's fine. Just drop it, okay?" But Clara doesn't drop it. Not entirely. Instead, she files the conversation away, resolving to approach the topic differently next time. Over the next few days, their dynamic shifts subtly. Jonathan begins seeking out opportunities to interact with Clara, though he masks it as casual oversight of her work. He asks about her methods, compliments her efficiency, and occasionally shares fragments of his own life. Once he mentions his father's struggles with alcoholism, his voice tinged with bitterness. Another time, he talks about the loneliness of leadership, admitting that most people only see him as a figurehead rather than a person. Each revelation chips away at the armor he's worn for so long, revealing glimpses of the man beneath. Clara listens intently, offering empathy without judgment. Slowly, trust begins to form between them, a fragile thread connecting two vastly different worlds. One afternoon, as Clara cleans the study, she stumbles upon an old photo tucked inside a drawer. It's a faded picture of a teenage boy standing awkwardly beside a girl who looks barely interested in being there. The resemblance to Jonathan is unmistakable. "Who's this?" she asks lightly, holding up the photo when Jonathan walks in. His face darkens immediately. "That's none of your business," he says sharply, snatching the photo from her hand. "I'm sorry," Clara replies, raising her hands in apology. "I didn't mean to snoop. It just looked like it meant something to you." Jonathan stares at the photo for a long moment, his jaw clenched. Finally, he sighs and sits down heavily in the chair behind his desk. "Her name was Sarah," he says quietly. "We went to high school together. I liked her a lot." Clara waits patiently, sensing this is a story he hasn't told in years. "She laughed at me," Jonathan continues, his voice hollow. "In Front of everyone. Said I was weird, pathetic. After that, I couldn't look at girls the same way. Every time I tried, I felt sick. Literally sick. Doctors couldn't explain it, so I stopped trying altogether. The weight of his confession hangs heavy in the air. Clara feels her chest tighten with sympathy. That must have been awful, she says finally. But Jonathan, that was years ago. You're not the same person anymore. Am I? He challenges, meeting her gaze. Because it still feels the same. The fear, the rejection, it's always there, lurking under the surface. Clara steps closer, her tone gentle but firm. Maybe it's not about avoiding triggers anymore. Maybe it's about facing them, finding out what really caused this. A reaction in the first place. Jonathan looks at her, his eyes searching hers for answers, or perhaps courage. For the first time, he allows himself to entertain the possibility that change might be within reach. And here, dear viewer, we pause once again. If you're intrigued by the layers of complexity unfolding in Jonathan and Clara's relationship, consider subscribing to our channel. Stories like these take time and effort to craft, and your support means everything to us. With that said, let's move forward. The days that follow are unlike any others in Jonathan's life. For the first time in years, he finds himself looking forward to Clara's visits, not just because of the work she does, but because of the way she makes him feel. She has a knack for asking questions that cut straight to the heart of things, yet she never pushes too hard. Her presence is steady, grounding, like an anchor holding him steady against the storm of his own thoughts. One evening, as Clara finishes cleaning the kitchen, Jonathan hesitates before speaking. "Clara," he begins, his voice tentative. "Do you believe people can change?" She turns to face him, her expression thoughtful. "I think everyone has the capacity to grow," she replies, "but it takes courage to confront the parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore." Jonathan nods, slowly absorbing her words. He wants to believe her, to trust that change is possible, but doubt lingers in the back of his mind. Still, something about Clara gives him hope. Maybe it's the way she listens without judgment, or the quiet strength she exudes even when faced with challenges of her own. Whatever it is, he feels drawn to her in ways he can't fully explain. Their conversations become more frequent, often spilling into late evenings after Clara has finished her work. They talk about everything and nothing. Books they've read, places they've been, dreams they've dared to dream. Through these exchanges, Jonathan begins to see Clara not just as a cleaner, but as a person with her own struggles and aspirations. One night, as they sit together in the dimly lit living room, Clara shares a piece of her own story. "When my mom got sick, I felt like the world was crumbling around me," she admits, her voice soft but steady. "There were days when I didn't know how I'd keep going, but somehow I did. And now, every little victory feels like proof that I'm stronger than I thought." Jonathan listens intently, struck by her resilience. "You're remarkable. You know that?" he says quietly. Clara smiles, though there's a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I'm just doing what I have to do. We all carry burdens, Jonathan. Yours might look different from mine, but they're still heavy." Her words linger in the air, resonating deeply within him. For so long, he's viewed his condition as a curse, a barrier he could never overcome. But hearing Clara speak about her own hardships reframes his perspective. Perhaps his allergy isn't just a limitation. Perhaps it's also an opportunity to heal, to grow, to become someone better. As their connection deepens, Jonathan begins to notice subtle changes in himself. His symptoms, once debilitating, seem less severe when Clara is near. He no longer feels the overwhelming urge to retreat when she enters a room. It's as if her presence creates a safe space, shielding him from the triggers that once controlled his life. Encouraged by this progress, Clara suggests taking things a step further. "What if we tested your reactions in different environments?" she proposes one afternoon. "Maybe it's not just about avoiding women, it's about understanding what specifically sets off your symptoms." Jonathan hesitates, uncertainty flickering across his face. "And if it doesn't work, if I end up worse than before, then we'll figure it out together," Clara assures him, her tone unwavering. "You don't have to do this alone." Her confidence emboldens him. Against his better judgment, he agrees to try. The experiment begins small. Clara invites Jonathan to accompany her to a nearby cafe, a neutral setting where they can observe his responses without overwhelming him. At first, Jonathan is tense, his body rigid as they walk through the crowded streets. But as they settle into a quiet corner of the cafe, surrounded by the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee, he starts to relax. "You're doing great," Clara whispers, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. Jonathan glances at her, startled by the warmth of her touch. For a moment, he forgets to breathe, not because of his allergy, but because of the way her presence fills the space between them. Over the next few weeks, they repeat the exercise in various locations: parks, libraries, even a bustling farmer's market. Each outing brings new insights. Jonathan learns that his reactions aren't triggered solely by proximity to women, but by specific environmental factors as well. Strong perfumes, cigarette smoke, mold spores lingering in poorly ventilated spaces. Clara documents their findings meticulously, creating a detailed log of triggers and responses. Together, they begin piecing together a clearer picture of his condition. But as much as Jonathan appreciates Clara's efforts, he can't shake the feeling that their relationship is shifting in ways he doesn't fully understand. There are moments when he catches himself staring at her, lost in thought. Moments when her laughter sends a shiver down his spine. Moments when he wonders if she feels the same pull he does, or if he's imagining it entirely. One evening, as they sit side by side on the balcony overlooking the city, Jonathan finally voices the question that's been haunting him. "Why are you helping me, Clara?" She turns to look at him, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the city lights. "Because I believe in you," she says simply, "and because I think you deserve a chance to live a full life, not one dictated by fear." Her words strike a chord deep within him. For the first time, Jonathan allows himself to imagine a future where he's free, not just from his allergy, but from the walls he's built around his heart. And here, dear viewer, we pause once again. If you're moved by the unfolding connection between Jonathan and Clara, consider subscribing to our channel. Their journey is far from over, and your support helps us bring stories like these to life. The invitation arrives unexpectedly, slipped under Jonathan's office door like a ticking time bomb. It's an elegant card, embossed with gold lettering, Annual Tech Innovators Gala, honoring visionaries who shape the future. Beneath the formal wording lies a daunting reality. This is not just another networking event, it's a battlefield of egos, alliances, and opportunities. And Jonathan, as one of the most prominent figures in the tech industry, cannot afford to miss it. But there's a catch. The gala is hosted by none other than Victoria Langley, a powerhouse CEO known for her charisma, sharp wit, and, most importantly, a penchant for surrounding herself with influential women. Every year, the guest list reads like a who's who of female executives, entrepreneurs, and innovators. For Jonathan, attending means stepping into a lion's den filled with potential. Triggers. He stares at the invitation for what feels like hours, his mind racing. How can he possibly navigate such an environment without succumbing to his symptoms? What if he embarrasses himself, or worse, jeopardizes a critical business deal? The thought alone sends a wave of anxiety coursing through him. Clara notices the change in him immediately. When she arrives the next morning, Jonathan is pacing his penthouse like a caged animal, muttering under his breath. She sets down her cleaning supplies and approaches him cautiously. "What's wrong?" she asks, her voice soft but firm. He hands her the invitation without a word. Clara scans it quickly, her brow furrowing as she pieces together the implications. "This is a big deal," she says finally. "You should go." Jonathan whirls around, incredulous. "Are you serious? Have you forgotten what happens when I'm around women? I'll be sneezing uncontrollably within 5 minutes. And have you forgotten everything we've learned over the past few weeks?" Clara counters, her tone unwavering. "Your reactions aren't inevitable, Jonathan. They're manageable if you're willing to face them." Her words hang in the air, challenging him to rise above his fear. But Jonathan isn't ready to concede. "It's easy for you to say that," he snaps. "You don't know what it's like to feel your body betray you every time you walk into a room." Clara steps closer, her gaze steady. "No, I don't. but I do know what it's like to fight for something worth fighting for. And I think this gala could be a turning point for you if you let it." For a long moment, they stand in silence, the weight of her words settling between them. Finally, Jonathan exhales sharply, running a hand through his hair. "Fine," he mutters. "I'll go. But if this goes south, don't say I didn't warn you." Clara smiles faintly, though her eyes betray a flicker of concern. "It won't," she says firmly, "because I'll be there with you." Over the next week, Clara devises a detailed plan to prepare Jonathan for the event. They practice breathing techniques to calm his nerves, identify safe zones within crowded spaces, and even rehearse conversations to help him feel more confident. Clara insists on accompanying him to the gala, not as his date, but as moral support, disguised as part of the catering staff. "You don't have to do this," Jonathan tells her one evening as they finalize their strategy. "Yes, I do," Clara replies without hesitation, "because I believe in you, and because I want to see you succeed, not just professionally, but personally." Her unwavering faith in him is both comforting and terrifying. Jonathan knows that failing at the gala would mean more than losing face. It would mean letting Clara down, and himself. The night of the gala arrives, and Jonathan finds himself standing outside the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton, his heart pounding like a drum. Inside, the hum of conversation mingles with the strains of a live jazz band, creating an atmosphere both exhilarating and intimidating. Clara gives him a reassuring nod from a discreet distance before slipping into the crowd. Taking a deep breath, Jonathan steps inside. At first, everything seems manageable. He navigates the room with practiced ease, exchanging pleasantries with colleagues and investors. But as the evening progresses, the density of the crowd increases, along with the intensity of perfumes and colognes wafting through the air. His throat begins to tighten, his sinuses itching ominously. Panic bubbles beneath the surface, threatening to overwhelm him. Just as he's about to retreat, Clara appears beside him, holding a glass of water. "Take a sip," she whispers, her voice calm but urgent. "Focus on your breathing. You've got this." Her presence steadies him, grounding him in the chaos. Slowly, deliberately, Jonathan follows her instructions, inhaling deeply through his nose and exhaling through his mouth. The symptoms subside, though they don't disappear entirely. Throughout the night, Clara remains his anchor, appearing whenever he needs her most. She distracts him with light-hearted anecdotes during awkward pauses, steers him away from particularly strong-smelling guests, and ensures he stays hydrated. Her interventions are subtle but effective, allowing Jonathan to maintain his composure. Despite the mounting pressure, by the end of the evening, Jonathan has not only survived the gala but thrived. He delivers a speech that earns thunderous applause, secures a lucrative partnership with a major tech firm, and even manages to engage in meaningful conversations with several female executives, all without triggering a full-blown allergic reaction. As they leave the venue together, Jonathan turns to Clara, his expression a mixture of gratitude and awe. "I couldn't have done it without you," he admits, his voice thick with emotion. Clara smiles softly, though there's a hint of sadness in her eyes. "Yes, you could have," she says gently. "You just needed to believe in yourself." Their shared triumph marks a turning point in their relationship. For the first time, Jonathan allows himself to acknowledge the depth of his feelings for Clara, not just as a friend or ally, but as someone who has changed the course of his life forever. And here, dear viewer, we pause once again. If you're inspired by Jonathan's journey and Clara's unwavering support, consider subscribing to our channel. Their story is nearing its climax, and your encouragement fuels our passion for storytelling. The days following the gala are a blur of reflection and revelation for Jonathan. For the first time in years, he feels a sense of accomplishment that isn't tied to his business empire or the accolades lining his office walls. Instead, it's rooted in something far more profound: the realization that he is capable of change, that he is not defined by his fears or his allergy, but by the choices he makes despite them. Clara notices the shift in him immediately. He walks taller, speaks with greater confidence, and seems more at ease in his own skin. Yet, there's also a new intensity in his gaze whenever he looks at her, an unspoken question lingering between them. One evening, as they sit together on the balcony overlooking the city, Jonathan finally breaks the silence. "Clara," he begins, his voice steady but tinged with vulnerability, "there's something I need to tell you." She turns to face him, her expression curious but calm. "What is it?" He hesitates, searching for the right words. How does one articulate feelings that have been simmering beneath the surface for months, feelings that have grown stronger with each passing day, yet remained unspoken until now? "You've changed my life," he says finally, his eyes locking onto hers, "not just by helping me understand my allergy, but by showing me that I'm capable of more than I ever thought possible. You've given me hope that I can live a full life without fear holding me back." Clara smiles softly, though her heart beats faster. She senses where this is going, but she lets him continue. "But it's more than that," Jonathan adds, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You've shown me what it means to truly connect with someone, to trust, to lean on another person without feeling weak. And I think I've fallen in love with you." The words hang in the air, heavy with meaning. Clara's breath catches in her throat, her mind racing to process what she's just heard. Part of her wants to respond immediately, to pour out the emotions she's kept buried for so long. But another part, the cautious, practical part, reminds her that love isn't just about feelings, it's about action. "Jonathan," she says gently, placing a hand over his, "I care about you deeply, more than I ever expected to. But before we take this step, I need to know, are you ready for this? Not just for me, but for everything it entails?" Her question catches him off guard, forcing him to confront the reality of what he's asking. Loving Clara isn't just about romance. It's about embracing vulnerability, committing to growth, and building a future together. "I am," he replies firmly, his resolve unwavering. "I don't want to go back to the way things were. I want to move forward with you." Tears well up in Clara's eyes as she nods, her heart swelling with emotion. "Then yes," she whispers, her voice trembling, "I love you too." Their kiss is tender yet charged with the weight of everything they've overcome. It's a moment neither of them will ever forget, a culmination of trust, courage, and mutual respect. But their journey doesn't end there. In the weeks that follow, Clara continues her work on Jonathan's penthouse, addressing the environmental factors that contributed to his symptoms. Mold hidden behind the walls, dust mites lurking in the upholstery, volatile organic compounds seeping from outdated cleaning products, all are systematically eradicated. By the time she finishes, the space feels transformed, not just physically, but emotionally. It's brighter, warmer, more inviting, like a home rather than a fortress. Meanwhile, Jonathan embarks on a personal mission to understand the root cause of his allergy. With Clara's encouragement, he seeks therapy to unpack the trauma of his past, the rejection, the ridicule, the years of isolation. Slowly but surely, he begins to heal, learning to reframe his experiences not as failures, but as stepping stones toward becoming a better version of himself. One afternoon, as they sit together in the newly renovated living room, Clara broaches a topic she's been thinking about for some time. "What if we used your story to help others?" she suggests, her tone thoughtful. "There are people out there who might be struggling with similar challenges, whether it's psychosomatic illnesses or emotional barriers. Imagine the impact we could have if we shared what we've learned." Jonathan considers her words a spark of inspiration, igniting within him. "You're right," he says finally. "This isn't just our story anymore. It's a chance to make a difference." Together they launch a foundation dedicated to supporting individuals with psychosomatic conditions. Through research grants, counseling programs, and public awareness campaigns, they aim to break down the stigma surrounding mental health and chronic illness. Jonathan becomes a vocal advocate for change, sharing his journey openly in interviews, conferences, and even a memoir titled Breaking Free. Clara, meanwhile, fulfills her dream of starting her own cleaning and organizing business. With Jonathan's backing, she expands her services to include consultations on creating healthier living environments, spaces free of allergens, toxins, and emotional clutter. Her clients rave about her holistic approach, crediting her not just with transforming their homes, but their lives. As their individual paths intertwine, Jonathan and Clara build a life rooted in purpose and partnership. They travel the world together, speaking at events, meeting others who've faced similar struggles, and spreading a message of hope and resilience. Along the way, they discover that true success isn't measured by wealth or fame, but by the connections we forge and the impact we leave behind. The final scene takes place years later, during the grand opening of their foundation's flagship center, a state-of-the-art facility offering cutting-edge treatments and resources for those in need. As Jonathan stands at the podium addressing a crowd of supporters, donors, and beneficiaries, he glances over at Clara, who watches him with pride shining in her eyes. "None of this would have been possible without her," he says, his voice filled with gratitude. "She taught me that love isn't just about finding someone who completes you. It's about growing together, challenging each other, and creating something bigger than ourselves." The audience erupts into applause, but Jonathan barely hears it. His focus remains on Clara, the woman who changed his life in ways he never thought possible. And here, dear viewer, we reach the end of Jonathan and Clara's extraordinary journey. If their story has inspired you, if it's reminded you that change is always possible, no matter how insurmountable the odds, then please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support allows us to share more stories like this one, stories that celebrate the power of love, resilience, and transformation. Thank you for joining us on this adventure. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support us, and until next time.